Hello, my name is Owen. Today I'll be doing a review of the movie My Policeman. I want to do something a little bit unique that I've never done before on this channel. What I want to do is tell you the things that I enjoyed from the movie, tell you things that didn't really work for me, and then I'm going to explain a little bit of how I think the movie could have been improved. Because I came up with this idea specifically for this movie because I'd never seen a movie that I disliked but was so close to being something incredible. And that left me confused. I saw it about 2 weeks ago. And I was just stuck these last 2 weeks thinking, why did that movie feel like it was almost good, but I didn't enjoy it? And I came up with a few concrete reasons, and I'd like to share those reasons with you and be the film doctor here. And I'm going to fix up this movie and how I think that it should have been presented in order to make it a better film. And keep in mind, I did not read the original source material, so some of my advice may mess with that. But hey, film adaptations do that all the time. It's not a one-to-one, right? It's not book to movie. It's got to be exactly the same. It just doesn't work like that. So, starting off the things that I did like. First of all, I had no issues with the acting here. I know Harry Styles is a controversial actor, but he's fine here, right? He's not an acting powerhouse. This isn't an Oscar-worthy performance. But he does the job necessary, right? And I think it hurts him a little bit that he has such a rabid fan base. Me personally, I love Harry Styles and I love him, his music and as a person. But when I was in the theater, there was a lot of Harry Styles fans who'd be when he's on screen, he's having intimate moments, oh my God, that's him. Which kind of took me out of it because it's supposed to be a very serious movie and just kind of takes you out of it a little bit, which I think is not his fault, but it's kind of unfortunate. And I would like to see the movie again in a more quiet, contemplative mood, I guess, or audience. But yeah, so that wasn't a problem with that. I think the actor that plays Patrick was by far the strongest actor in the film. Very compelling actor, and I really bought into his character. And that is not old Patrick, like the normal Patrick. Weak performances. Honestly, I thought the weakest performance was from old Marion. And I'll get into a little bit of that later. But I really like the acting. And it's aspects of the story that I really liked, which goes into the things that didn't work for me. Overall, I think this movie suffers from a massive lack of focus. And what do I mean by that? I think that this film should have stuck to a theme and tailored the story to fit that theme. What I thought the movie was going to be about before seeing it was that it was going to be about Marion and how she deals with the circumstances of her husband, Tom, being in love with Patrick, but their love being taboo in society that could lead them both in being thrown in prison or possibly killed. That's what I thought it was going to be exploring. It was going to be exploring her jealousy and her guilt and her anger and just her confliction. Is that the right word? Confliction, how she was conflicted. And it was about that a little bit, right? But watching the movie, what they did was they did that, and they also did a little bit of Tom's internalized homophobia and how that affects the entire trajectory of his life, which I also thought was very, very compelling. However, they didn't commit to either one of those. So instead, what we got was glimpses of both of those themes. So the issue with that is that without having an overall theme that you're committing to, the movie became a collection of scenes rather than a coherent piece. And the other reason for that, before I tie this whole point together, is it suffers from a pacing issue as well. It was an interesting idea to have the present day with the older actors and then the flashbacks of the relationships just creating and Patrick and Tom's love affair and stuff like that. However, how it was, I'm going to say edited, maybe not necessarily structured, but edited, slowed the entire film down dramatically. And it's mostly because of the thing I said, with the themes. Because in the flashbacks, it's a theme a lot about Tom. The movie is mostly about Tom and how he deals with his guilt of being gay and being in love with Patrick, right? And he hates himself for that because he knows that he should love Marion, but he can't, right? And he keeps going back to Patrick, and Patrick is amazing too. Like there's nothing wrong with him. And Marion loves Patrick too, but like as a different relationship. And that's what the flashbacks are about mainly, right? And Marion in as a character in the flashbacks is like more like an optimistic, like just like, oh my God, everything's so great. And then when she discovers it, it's like she becomes like almost the villain because of how hurt she is. Like she lashes out by throwing Patrick in prison. But the present day scenes, the main character is by far Marion. And that's because like Tom really does not want to be in the house at all. Patrick is nonverbal because of his stroke. I think it was a stroke. So it's about her, and it's about her reading through Patrick's old journal and her trying to get Tom to talk with Patrick and her expressing her thing. It's just like you're wasting your life. Like we're not happy together and stuff like that. Right. So the present day scenes are what I thought the movie was going to be about the entire film, but the flashbacks are more about Tom and like his internalized homophobia. But even then, they don't commit in the individual scenes because they spend a lot of time with Marion, even in the flashbacks, about her discovering it, her being angry, her talking with her teacher friend, who was also a lesbian, which I thought was a very strange scene. I felt like I didn't feel earned because she didn't really learn anything from that. So it's just kind of like, well, then you'd hate me too. And Marion's basically like, okay, yeah, I do, you're right. And like she just like does the bad thing. She throws Patrick in prison anyway. It's like, oh, wow, you learned a lot from that character, for sure. Glad they were in the film. Anyway, but it's just, like, how it was structured as well. So, like, first of all, the love scenes between Patrick and Tom, I thought were very, very beautiful. I was expecting to, like, be as, not graphic, but, like, as show as much as they did. But I thought they were very artistically done, and I've never seen, like a homosexual relationship to play, or especially man-to-man, displayed like that, because it wasn't vulgar at all. It was just like very romantic and very like, I don't know, it was just beautiful. But then they would immediately end almost every single one of these scenes with a cut to old Marion reading the book, and she's like, really? And it makes you think like, wait a minute, like is she just discovering like their affair now because of how the movie's structured? But then as the movie progresses, you realize that no, like flashback Marion did find out and she was mad about it and she did something about it. But like the performance of old Marion was like, like she's like a bitter old woman. Even though she's like, Tom, like you gotta like, it wasn't like, Tom, you gotta see Patrick. It was like, Tom, you must see Patrick. This book, oh God, this book. It's like, are you mad? I can't tell if you're mad. And then they end the film with her being like, I'm leaving you, Tom. And then she goes, I'm free. I got the car window. Because then they missed maybe it wasn't even a theme issue with Marion and like her struggle with that. Is that they chose to make her a villain instead of like overcoming her prejudice and her betrayal, her circumstantial betrayal of her husband, right? They decided to make it about her and her being trapped, which I felt like was a poor direction to take because it takes away from the message of Tom's internalized homophobia and Marion's like caught between two lovers and like the society pressure on them, because she didn't really learn anything from it. The only emotions that she felt through this film were like initial love with Tom, betrayal towards Tom and Patrick, and then like guilt question mark, but mostly anger that Tom won't see Patrick. And they should have committed to either a Marion redemption arc or a Tom redemption arc, and they didn't commit to either. That's a better way to put it than themes. They didn't commit to a redemption arc of either. And like not redemption is like they were bad but like at the very, very end, like Tom has this, like old Tom and old Patrick have the scene like where they like do the little like finger thing, and it was like super cute. But there wasn't enough build up to that because they didn't explore Tom, especially old Tom, nearly enough. Like the scene where he's in the car and he sees like the modern day gay couple, like and they're making out in the store, and like he starts bawling his eyes out. That just felt like a great scene. But within the context of the whole movie, it wasn't like old Tom, maybe not like flashback Tom, but old Tom like was not built up to that. And it was confusing to me why he was so adamant about not seeing Patrick at all. Is it because he knew that it would reawaken the feelings of him? Is it because he actually is bitter towards Patrick for like ruining his life, from awakening these feelings? Like I wasn't sure exactly why he was so against seeing Patrick. And it's because I don't think the writers knew. I think they just like either maybe the book that's happening in the book, or they're just like, oh well, Marion has to like be like the bridge between, even though she's the one that initially drove them apart. It just felt very, very, very unfocused to me in terms of what they were trying to do. Because some of my favorite scenes were the ones I just stated when he's in the car, and then also the scene at the honeymoon where Patrick comes in, they're at the dinner table, and like Tom is like, oh, like, well, you're gonna be my stay-at-home wife and you're gonna have kids. And it was very interesting to me that a gay man had such strict, rigid views of how like women in their place in society. And then Patrick goes like, oh, like really? Like you're the one's gonna say that? Like he agrees like with the audience, like really? Like you? And he goes like, what do you know? Like you know nothing about marriage. And he gets so mad about that because it's all the emotions like wrapped up into like a complicated ball, because he has these views about like how he should live his life and how his wife should be and how he should be, but he knows he's not that, and he's getting advice from the person that he loves more than anything else in the world, but he shouldn't love them. So it's like that, more scenes like that, more exploring it, more breaking it down, instead of like silent scenes of like old people like staring out into the distance like, oh, we're so sad now. And even the scene of Tom burning his police uniform ended up just being individually a good, powerful scene, but in the context of the whole movie, didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Because think of it this way. He's burning the policeman uniform. Why? Because maybe he sees that as like it's a representation of the institution that put Patrick away, right? And he was a part of that. He was a part of the group that arrests people like Patrick and people like him and throws them in prison where they get beat up and they spend their lives in prison, and it's horrible. Right, so he's burning it because he's like, I don't want to be a part of that anymore. And then the flashback to the future, he's like, yeah, well, but guess what? That wasn't one of them. That wasn't me. And you know what, Patrick? I don't really like him that much. You didn't explain how he gets from point A to point B. Does he love Patrick and does he hate society, or does he accept society and falls victim to his own internalized homophobia? Like it felt almost like two different movies. And they were just so disjointed. So when you intercut them, it immediately like takes the emotional momentum away. So it's like you see this love story of like Patrick and Tom, like they're exploring like their own like sexuality, and it's like, oh, are they gonna hook up? And then they do hook up, and then immediately cuts to like old woman like journal. Ugh, I gotta take care of this stroke victim. Ugh. It's like what are we watching here? And the fact that they give the shot of Marion and she's just like free in the car, like, oh, I did it. You didn't do anything besides cause problems, complain, and blame Tom instead of blaming like society, which is the whole point of the movie. Is that it's society's fault that these people did not have a happy life. So being like, Tom, you're kind of a moron for not seeing Patrick right now. And you know what? Like my life was wasted because of this, and you're still not taking the chance. Like, I'm leaving. Like, why didn't they just divorce instantly? You know what I mean? So I'm supposed to believe that they spent like 30 years of their life in between like the flashbacks in the present day where like they just like didn't speak at all, and they didn't divorce for why? They didn't have kids. So what did they do? Because they didn't conform to Tom's original view of how a family should be. They got a dog. That's what they did in 30 years. And then it's not until Patrick like comes back to their lives where they're finally like, oh, like I guess we haven't talked about this for 30 years or even talked to each other about anything. Like, did they have a good relationship when Patrick was in prison? Like, they didn't make it clear. So that's why it just feels so disconnected, because it feels like they almost like had two, like the old and the young versions were the two completely different characters that the same things happened to, if that makes sense. So yeah, so how would I fix this movie? All right, this is the part where it's a little bit speculative and you might have your own opinions. However, how I'd fix this movie is, number one, massively re-edit this movie, right? So first of all, I would cut down the present day Marion scenes probably by 50 to 80%, because I think that a lot of it was just like her running in circles, especially because she goes nowhere, right? She's like, because she doesn't really get closer to Patrick, besides like they end up like sharing a cigarette, and there's no reason for them to be like, for her to be bitter at Patrick, right? Because he's the one that wronged her. right? And the fact that like Patrick has like had a stroke and he can't talk, like it limits a lot of like the dramatic potential, especially since Marion is not that sympathetic of a character. So cut that down a lot. Keep the stuff with Tom and like him like still dealing with his like the consequences of how he decided to live his life in the present. That was good stuff. But either relegate it to the very beginning of the movie or the very end of the movie, right? And I also think that if you got to commit to a singular viewpoint, if you want Marion to be the main character, then you have to change maybe not how she's presented in the flashbacks, but how she reacts, how it is in, okay, hold on. I'm going to say this. So in the flashbacks, Marion, like initially the movie starts with like the whole thing where she meets Tom, she's falling in love with him, and then like Patrick comes in and it's like, oh my God, like does Patrick have a crush on Marion? Like we don't know. Then it like goes back and says like, no, like they are lovers. You know what I mean? And I don't think that was necessary. It might be easier to just like combine those two, like overlap them. So like as she meets and falls in love with Tom, or maybe like Tom meets him first, stuff like that, combine them. Because like the way they try to do the thing where it's like, look, this is how it happened, but this is how it really happened, didn't really work for me. So I would change that. And also, that would also work to like shorten the film a lot. Overall, this film's gonna be a lot shorter. It's gonna be a lot tighter, right? And then the other way, if you want to intersperse present day scenes in it, the only scenes you intercut are the scenes of her like reading the journal. And here's my thing about the journal, right? Because the issue I have with old Marion is that when she reads the journal, the actress decided to read it like it was the first time she ever read it. Not by going like, God. It was more like, Like it was like a very stone-faced, like old woman, like, because I was confused, like, did you, like each of these events, did you know that they happened? And I think initially I thought no, but then obviously she rats out Patrick and they read the journal in court. So why is she acting like she never read this before? Therefore, I would change this where I go away from editing, more like direction. I would tell the old Marion, I would say, this is how you thought of the journal when you first read it. You were angry, you were bitter, you were betrayed, you were cheated on. In court, you're bitter, right? And honestly, I would get rid of like the plot line of her like trying to testify to save him. Or maybe if you do it, like have her more like a visceral reaction when she finds out actually how much that they did to each other. So she's like, okay, I kind of feel bad for Jordan Man, but I'm gonna like testify for him. And it's kind of like, oh, you did what? You did what? But then in the future, have her show some emotion. Because now she's like, at this point of her life, she's seeing the relationship for what it really was. It was true love. And she's the one that got in the way with that. And that would make her ending scene so much more powerful when she leaves, because she's not leaving for herself to be free. She's leaving as like punishment. She's like self-exiled because she should still love Tom. But she should realize that like she's the reason why his life was miserable, and that she was never happy because he could never love her as much as she wanted him to. And she's the reason for that. She's the crux of it. And it's not because it's like her fault. She was just caught in a horrible situation. But it's not Tom's fault. And she didn't come to the conclusion that she did that. So when she read this in, I'll tell the actress, said, this is how you thought of originally. But now you're reading the greatest love story of all time. How does that change? How does it change your perspective when you realize that you are the villain? And that's such an interesting character point. And it would have been so interesting to explore. And that would honestly allow you to expand and maybe even put back in some old Marion scenes if that's the character direction you're going to take it. Because it adds such a different layer, because she basically pushed forward Tom's internalized homophobia, which is a very interesting character point about his like view of society, coupled with like how he is. It's such an internal conflict, right? And she has to come to the realization that she was furthering that conflict by pushing the more traditional side on him and sending Patrick away and like isolating him like with her basically. But in order to make her the protagonist, she has to realize that, and she has to make dramatic, emotional realizations and decisions to rectify her wrongs. And that's how you make her not only a sympathetic character, but a hero, like that she pretended to be at the end. So that's kind of like loose guidance. If I was good at editing, I would just take this film and be like, but I'm not. But that's what I would do. I would either I would combine some things, overlap some things to make it a little bit more coherent, less momentum breaks with the long present day scenes. But I would change the direction of the present day scenes, have the actors think more about the context of what they did in the past and how it affects today. Does Tom still think that a woman's place is at home, taking care of the kids, even in the future? We don't know, right? Obviously, at the end, he realizes that he shouldn't have been hiding himself. But we didn't see where he's at before he came to that realization at the very end. So that's what I got for you guys. Let me know what you think of my recommendations. Let me know what you thought of the movie. And I'm sure you guys disagree or disagree on some things. So if you've seen the movie or you read the book even, let me know. Let me know about it. Talk about it. I want to hear about it. Also, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. It actually does help me a lot and lets me know if you guys are interested in stuff like this in the future. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much and have a great day.